Hello and welcome. This is Impactpreneur by Connecting Dreams Foundation SRCC chapter, which delves right into the depths of social entrepreneurship and the various aspects involved in it.
Hello and welcome. On this podcast, we'll be talking about stakeholder management and its importance in social entrepreneurship. In today's daily functioning corporate world, the stakeholders of an organization partially represent the face of the enterprise, but not much focus has been given on this topic as to how we maintain good, proper, and regular relations with our stakeholders. To get a clear picture of this topic and its applications in social entrepreneurship, we welcome Dr. Gayathri Vaudevan on board. She is the chairperson of LabourNet Services Private Limited and has done her PhD on development economics and international development. She has been working in the civic and social organization industry and is skilled in sustainable development, social enterprise, corporate social responsibility, strategic planning, and rural development. We welcome you to today's podcast, ma'am.
Thank you, Tarun. I'm
Yes,
happy to talk to all of you.
It's a pleasure having you with us on board, ma'am. Without further ado, let's begin. It's great to see your interest and work in social enterprises and sustainable development goals. It would be great if you could carry us through your journey in social entrepreneurship from the time you started taking an interest in it to date.
So, I started working in this field 13 years back, in 2007 to be precise. Um, Now, when you think of a social enterprise and social entrepreneurship, there are two critical words there: social and enterprise, or social and entrepreneur. What does an enterprise mean? Enterprise means the moment you think enterprise, you think private sector. You think profit, you think uh, growth, you think the words which come to mind are profit and growth. The moment you think social, you think of service, you think of people, you think of community development. So the very fact that both have joined together means that one is looking at profit, one is looking at growth, but with a sharp focus on impact. Your community, your people, and everything which is related to development gets intertwined. So, an intertwined entity of a social enterprise or a social entrepreneur's life is focused on ensuring sustainability in a manner in which the impact and the social goals are met. And I think that's the journey I started with in 2007. And the reason I did it was my goal was to enable livelihood, which is in fact a very, in a sense, it's the most direct goal and has the most complexity, right? You want to ensure people get wages, people get work, people get paid better for what they do. If that is the case, I felt that this is the entity or the let's say the microcosm of the organization in which I would like to work. I'd like to work in a field which ensures that it has all the good points of the private sector and all the good points of the social sector. A combination of the two is what is a social enterprise, and that's the journey that the last 13 years has been for me.
That's a very inspiring journey, ma'am. Your vision of enabling livelihood has impacted a lot of lives today. Now, moving on to the next question. According to you, what is the difference between a social enterprise and a normal enterprise?
A social enterprise has a dual motive to be profitable and sustainable. For example, in ours, enabling livelihood means that the moment a worker makes money, we make money. So it has to be directly linked to an social impact. You could be a health social enterprise, an energy social enterprise, a food processing social enterprise, or an a workplace social enterprise, as we are. So in all cases, I think the difference is the fact that a social enterprise has to have a dual motive, whereas a pure enterprise has to have a single motive, which is profit, growth, and making sure that the equity investors are and debt investors are taken care of. Whereas in a social enterprise, it does have a strong social element which is embedded in it.
That was a very apt explanation for the differences between a social enterprise and a normal enterprise. Now, moving on. Considering the number of social problems faced in today's society, how important is it to bring the concept of social entrepreneurship to today's youngsters?
In a sense, I feel the need is even more today than it was in the past, because the next decade is going to see, I mean, as all of you are passing out, you're in the most tumultuous time in history, possibly in over 100 years. uh, the problems of society are going to be tremendous, and we're all going to try to find our way through it. So the need for someone to think for both social good as well as sustainability is going to become paramount. And I also feel it's an enjoyable journey because it gives you purpose. Anything which gives you purpose also means that there is joy in it. So from that perspective, um, uh, it's not a completely just something that you take up because it's good to do. It's also good for you from a career perspective. So I think from that perspective, important. And to summarize, the times have changed. The next decade is going to be the toughest, as one comes out of education and finds their feet in the market. The market is going to show you many paths, and the market itself is suffering today. If the market is suffering, in that case, the question you need to ask yourself is, can I make the market suitable for myself? And I think that's the opportunity all of you have, which I think is again a once in a lifetime opportunity in over 100 years.
That is absolutely true. Considering the number of problems which are going to crop up in the upcoming decade, we are sure to see a lot of youngsters venturing into social entrepreneurship. Now, moving towards stakeholder management, I would like to start with its popularity. Do you think the concept of stakeholder management is underrated in today's functioning of commerce?
So when you think of stakeholders, the one stakeholder one often thinks of is your investors, right? Anybody who's put money in you is your equity investor or your debt. If someone's giving you, in that case, these are the two you imagine is your stakeholder. But actually, in a social enterprise, you have a much wider stakeholder net. As in any company, managing your equity and your debt investors is very, very important and critical. But more important in a social enterprise is co-opting the larger public to believe in you, to believe in your cause, because your cause is sort of is transcending between doing good and doing well. So when you marry the two, the stakeholders rise, right? You have state as a stakeholder, so you have government of various bodies, various levels, which become invariably your stakeholder. The people become your stakeholder because you are looking at, in most social enterprises, there's some behavioral change or so. Like in ours, it is about work, skill training. These are the behavioral change. We want people to think there is a chance for them to make it and work for it. Whereas in energy, it could be something else. So in health, it could be something else. But fundamentally, you're looking at a behavior change, which means a lot of engagement with different actors in order for them to believe in your overall goal as well as the goal of growth that you're driving. Sustainability, growth, and mission are three things which require stakeholder management to be redefined and rethought.
Sustainability, growth, and mission. These words are surely going to be remembered when we talk about stakeholder management next time. Now, moving on to our next question. Could you recollect for us any practical situation in which you can relate to the functioning or strategy undertaken for proper stakeholder management in your company?
I'll give you a real life example. There was a particular village in which we were working. In the village, the need of the hour was employment. Employment in a rural area, which is not too far out, but is still rural enough, is always difficult. Which means that one has to look at where will the funds come for training, where will the funds come for employment, and who will give employment, are all three very important metrics which are there. So the way we decided to operate was to work through the local chapters in order to induct many people into believing in that cause, and therefore even setting up a small industry there, which means private sector had to come in and ensure that an industry is set up, a small unit, but a unit nevertheless. The local people had to be convinced that this is a good place for you to work in, and you have to skill in order for you to work in. Over time, over 1,000 jobs could be created there because of the way in which the society looked at it. So I think that's one example that I could take. The other is a more larger example of a program we ran called Recognition of Prior Learning. When we started it in 2008, 2010, not many people believed that one could get trained and assessed in your workplace. It was always assumed that, like education, skill training had to be done in a classroom situation. But with the change, with evangelizing the concept of RPL, it also meant that it changed. The very concept of recognition of prior learning changed, with many more people coming in and adding what is relevant to themselves. So if you look at 2020, the same concept will look very different because of the varied stakeholders who came in and reimagined the way in which one needs to recognize one's prior learning. So I think that's an example which I would think is appropriate in this context.
These examples are extremely powerful, and it surely emphasizes the importance of stakeholder management. Now, moving on to the next question. How important do you think stakeholder management is to social enterprises considering its motive of impact over profit?
I think all the more reason it's very, very important, because unless everybody is bought into your vision, the vision is insurmountable, right? As I was giving you through the example, your equity investors, your debt investors have to believe returns may not be as fast. You don't have a cookie cutter approach, so you have to innovate as you go. So they need to trust that you're doing it for the right reason. They need to trust that their money will still come back even though you've taken it. At the social side, they need to be bought into your idea, because if they're not bought into your idea, in that case, implementing itself could be problematic. So I think stakeholder in management is one of the most important ones for any organization, and more so for a social enterprise.
That's a very interesting way to put it, ma'am. It's going to be a challenging task to convince an investor to invest in a social enterprise than a normal enterprise because of the impact aspect coming in between. But that is why the stakeholder management principles are there to help. Moving on to our final question. What would be your advice to the younger generations for them to take up social entrepreneurship?
I think, okay, here I'm going to be nuanced. I think it's good for youngsters to enter this as social entrepreneurs or join social enterprises. But I think they should come in thinking they're coming into any other corporate job. So the skill sets they should bring for themselves is not substandard. I would also say that youngsters shouldn't, many times I hear this, that I came into this because I think I don't have to work as hard, which I think is not true. You'll have to work as hard as anywhere else. Um, you should come in with a view, longish view on it. So a long-term view is very, very important for one to choose a career path. So there are two ways of looking at it. One is to enter it as you complete. The other is to engage with social enterprises throughout your education time. I often think in India, education and uh, work experience are not seen as something happening together. So maybe this is a time for many youngsters who are in colleges to work with social enterprises during college time to determine whether they would like to enter into the realm of social enterprises or private sector or the government, state sectors. These are the three that are choices there. So which sector do you want to choose is possibly something that you have to weigh very hard. And in my mind, doing it through your course is probably the best way to understand it before you have to take a decision.
These are indeed wise words, ma'am. We are sure that our listeners and college students would look into their prospects of taking social entrepreneurship as a career path. We have come to the end of this podcast. We thank you, ma'am, for being with us on today's podcast. It has been a very fruitful one, and we are sure our listeners have a lot to take from this. Thank you again.
Hope you liked today's episode. Thank you, and stay tuned for more informative bites on the aspects of entrepreneurship by Connecting Dreams Foundation SRCC chapter.